Hey everybody, Corey here, coming at you with another knife first impressions video. Today we are taking a look at the Jake Hoback Sumo. If you're new around here, consider subscribing. I try to put out knife related content on a regular basis. So the Sumo. The Sumo has been praised for one, its unique design, and two, its fidgetability, because this is a knife that has, let's get my face out of here, has a flipper tab, it's got a thumb stud, it's got the fuller, and it's a button lock. Okay, so you can gravity the button, you can thumb flick it, you can reverse flick it, and then you can use that flipper tab. I'm not going to use the flipper tab, we'll talk about why, but you can use the flipper tab. And let's start with the elephant in the room here. Okay, this is $550. Okay, we're talking Chris Reeve large Sabenzo with an inlay levels of pricing for this guy. Okay, now some of you immediately, you just left, you're gone, right? Because you'd never pay that much for a knife. Let the record show, I would not pay $550 for this. I was very fortunate, I was very lucky. I found it on the secondary for $390, and that's basically about as much as I would ever want to pay for this. And we'll talk about why, okay? But, you know, let it be known, these are made in the USA, okay? So I'm not saying the quality isn't there. I'm just saying you're definitely getting hit with a made in the USA and maybe even a little bit of designer upcharge, because just from a knife perspective, and after I've handled all the knives that I have in my career, $550 for this, it's such a hard no. Like, at least Chris Reeve knives can kind of be justified because, like, at the end of the day, they are great users, okay? And let's talk about that, right? So the first thing I want to say, this knife, as I said, was praised for the fidget factor. The problem that I'm running into is that there are so many different deployment options, and anyone who knows anything about knives knows that a detent is basically the number one factor in how all of your deployment methods perform, right? The strength of your detent is going to determine, like, the snappiness of the thumb stud, the action of the flipper, everything. Well, the problem is, when you try to put this many deployment methods on a knife, there's no way that you can perfectly tune a detent to make them all feel great, right? So the problem that we run into is that this thing becomes a jack of all trades and a king of none when it comes to deployment methods, because in my opinion, the detent on the button lock is a little soft. It's satisfying to do the gravity thing with the button lock, but here is me deploying the flipper. So for the flipper, it kind of gets a pass, because Jake Hoback himself in the Sumo video says that you need to give the flipper tab some wrist for it to fully deploy. Okay, so the designer says that that was kind of intended, or at least he's just talking about it, right? So I'm not going to hit it too hard for that. But again, we're running into an issue of, if you can't get it right, do you do it at all, right? Some people are okay with wrist, some people aren't. Me personally, I'd like to see it without it. The thumb stud. I can reliably deploy it with the thumb stud, but compared to other thumb stud flipper knives, it's a little slow, it's a little clunky, and because the detent is so soft, it feels like you can't really build up any, energy in your flip, and it just feels like this very soft, like, there's like no snap to it, unless you want to throw your wrist into it again. But again, do you want to throw your wrist into it? And then same thing for the reverse flick. The detent is so light that it takes off as soon as you put pressure on it, and it doesn't feel like I'm really flipping it. It feels like I'm guiding it. It actually flips the best when my middle finger is like following it the whole way. So what am I saying? Is it a fidget monster? Kind of. it's a fidget monster in the sense that you can deploy it so many different ways, but it's not a fidget monster in the sense that, to me, like, none of them are satisfying. As a matter of fact, the most satisfying one to me is just doing the button lock thing, which I love you to death. You know, it's cool. It's a cool knife. I'm glad you made this knife. But you can do this on the $70, you know, button locks that Civivi is putting out these days. So I'm a little torn there. So that's what I'll say. You know, every deployment method, while it's nice to have options, feels like a solid 5 out of 10. And in the case of the flipper tab, it feels like it's like a 4 out of 10, right? The next thing I want to point out, even though other people have beaten it to death, this pocket clip right there, that edge, I have never in my life felt a pocket clip that had a hot spot this bad. If you hold this knife in a saber grip, which is how I believe it was strictly intended to be held, the pocket clip sits in a position where it won't stab you. As soon as you move around, oh my god, as soon as you choke up on this knife, as soon as you try to do a hammer grip, this thing is indescribably uncomfortable, and I promise I'm not just being dramatic on that. It almost feels like it's like he's trying to train dogs when he made this knife. And he made the pocket knife so uncomfortable, or the pocket clip so uncomfortable, that if you hold it in any position other than a saber grip, it hurts you, because it's his way of telling you, don't do that. I mean, it's really sharp. And then the other thing I want to point out, where the backspacer terminates, up here, I don't know why it comes to those two fine points. I don't know why he cut out that U shape. And at first I thought it was for flipper clearance, but as we can see, the flipper tab, look at the edge of the flipper tab, it doesn't even come close to the top of where that cutout is. He could have just as easily like domed it and just left it hollow, but instead we, you know, had to make it look a little unique and a little edgy. But as a result, even in a saber grip, if you bring your thumb back, like watch my thumb, if I bring my thumb back a little bit, it's resting on those two cutouts. And again, look at how thin those are. Those are crazy uncomfortable. So not only can you only really use a saber grip with this, even the saber grip, you have to hold it in a very specific way so that those two things from the backspacer aren't digging into your thumb. All right. Those have been my takeaways in my first 2 days with this knife, right? Again, it's a fidget monster if you like options. But I have handled knives that do thumb studs better. I've handled knives that do flippers better. I've handled knives that do fullers better. Jack of all, king of none. And then secondly, it really feels like this knife was designed for fidgeting first and being a knife second, because actually holding it and actually using it is either painful or it requires too much conscious thought for it not to be painful. So, you know, it sucks because it really is such a unique knife. And honestly, there would be so much less that I would have to complain about if the pocket clip was different and if the backspacer was different. They're just so small design choices that could be changed, but in its current state, you're paying $550 for a fidget toy. And if you have a Sumo and you love your Sumo, I'm very happy for you, right? Because you spent a lot of money on this thing. And if it's everything you wanted it to be, I'm so happy for you. For me, if I want a fidget toy, I'm probably going to pick a different knife. And if I want a user knife, I'm definitely going to pick a different knife. So those are my initial impressions of the Hoback Sumo. I will definitely be spending more time with this. I don't just want to bury it immediately, but these are the things that I think you guys should know. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope I did you some sort of service by talking about some of this, and I will see you guys next time.